Welcome to the Hair Loss Show. Dr. Russell Knudsen and Dr. Vikram Jayaprakash discuss issues relating to hair loss and the medical and surgical treatment of hair loss in both men and women.
Hi everyone and welcome back to the Hair Loss Show. My name is Dr. Vikram Jayaprakash.
And I'm Dr. Russell Knudsen. Welcome.
And thanks again for watching. Please remember, if you haven't subscribed yet, we really want to get over that 100,000 subscriber mark.
So close now.
Absolutely.
95,000 and counting.
So we're really grateful and really honored that you're watching. So if you haven't subscribed, if you could do us a favor and just hit that subscribe button, that really helps get the message out to more people. Well, thanks again. And so today's episode, we want to talk a bit more generic, about hair and specifically the fact of what aging does to the hair. Because, one of the things that we talk about a lot on this channel is androgenic alopecia, whether it's in men or women. But there's also something that happens to the hair as we age. Right, so it's not people don't necessarily experience that sort of male or female pattern hair loss, but they can also experience a lot of different changes to the actual hair structure with the passage of time.
So I'm going to start by telling you just to remember the bit of the hair that you can see is dead. Right, the only living part of the hair follicle is under the skin. Yep. So this is rope, if you like, and rope has the capacity to have effects from environmental damage, which could be washing, brushing, scratching your hair, colouring it, perming it, whatever. So the longer you wear your hair, by definition, the longer it's been there in the environment, and it's more susceptible to environmental damage. But on top of that, there's the natural order of what happens with the rapidly dividing cells in the hair follicle as you age. And things change. We know this for our skin, we know this for every part of our body. It's also true for hair. So just to put it a little bit in context, in the first 25 years of our life, we have a pretty standard version of our hair. Okay, so the numbers are pretty good, the volume of the hair is pretty good. Obviously you can have fine hair versus coarse hair, but it's stable for the first 25 years or thereabouts. And then after it starts to change. It's a little bit different for men and for women. So, and it's more noticeable for women because they wear their hair longer, right? So if the shorter you wear your hairstyle, the less you're going to notice this. But what happens for men after the age of 25 is very gradually, to a varying degree, the number of hairs that are willing to grow diminishes a little bit. So normally about 90% of your hairs are in hair growth phase and about 10% aren't. So the numbers will gradually decline. So for example, I don't have the same volume of hair or number of hairs growing on my scalp now that I had 20 years ago, for example, and photographs demonstrate that clearly, that I am a little bit thinner than I was. But I don't have it in a pattern, it's just a generalised the part of ageing. So the numbers come off a little bit and the volume of the hair comes off a little bit. And I would remind another thing of people that when we're talking about measuring volume, is the hair is elliptical, not circular. So it depends which axis you measure that determines that. But we know that the volume comes off a little bit. That's in men. In women, something interesting happens. From about the age of 25, the number of hairs will gradually start to decline. But the volume of the hair, meaning the diameter of the scalp hairs, increases until the early 40s, which we think is a stimulation from estrogen hormone. All right, so basically these counteract each other to a degree, right? So there's a slight loss of number, but it's counteracted by an increase in the hair volume, meaning the diameter. But as women get to their mid-40s and start to get into this premenopausal phase and their estrogen levels start to fall, that's when they get the double whammy like men do, which is both the numbers start to decline and the diameter starts to decline. And that's when the women come in and say, I used to have this great head of hair, I have this great volume of hair, and now I don't have it anymore. And then we put the video microscope on them and there's nothing to find. Right? They all look healthy, they're still in groups, and basically it's still a great head of hair by our definition. But women are very good, it turns out, at self-assessing volume. And so you want to believe them when they come in and tell you that they've lost volume. So it's not just reassuring necessarily to say to them, well, it's aging, what do you think? What do you expect? But you've got to be sympathetic to it because it's a real thing. So what do you do about it? Well, for women that have a very high starting point, maybe nothing, because it still would be just
Yes.
coming down to a healthy head of hair that anybody else had. And they had this crowning glory. That's the comment I hear all the time. It used to be my crowning
Yeah.
glory. And it comes off a little bit. If you had thinner hair, as in finer hair, with slightly lower numbers, then that little bit of loss can be devastating because it takes you from low normal down to low. And so that's when you've got to think about stimulation therapy. And so probably the starting point for me would be minoxidil.
Yes.
For this patient. I'd say that, look, if you're willing to do it, it's a natural part of ageing, and you're going to have to do this for the rest of your days. So take that on board, that this is not a simple short-term therapy, it's long-term therapy. But the most important thing you can do going forward is stimulation. So that could be minoxidil, if you want to do non-invasive. You could do derma rolling, for example, to try and create stimulation. You can use laser, which is quite effective. It works. These things all work through different pathways. So minoxidil works through one pathway, laser works through another pathway, and derma rolling works through another pathway. So these are all complementary things, and you could use them to varying degrees. So that's really the answer to it. It's not really a disease process. It's a normal function of ageing. Sometimes it's more cosmetically important to the patient than at other times. But basically, the answer is to use a proper recognised stimulation therapy.
So I think there's really important there that as you age, you're going to see a loss of numbers, and you're also going to see a loss of the thickness of each hair.
Yeah.
And then there's another factor that's also going to be at play. All right, as if you look at someone who's older, there's a loss of colour. And that can also have a visual impact in how people see. So you get the trifecta of the loss of numbers, loss of diameter, and the loss of color. Because when hair that had a lot of pigment in it before loses its color, light shines through. It becomes essentially see-through. Light will shine through, hit the scalp, and give that also give that illusion of a lower density. But when you bring you have a look under magnification, you actually find that there's still quite a lot of hair there. It's just that it's really difficult to see.
Can't see it. Okay, so that comes back to the idea that hair is made up of keratin, and keratin is the same as your fingernail. And that's why you can see your nail bed through your fingernail, because it's basically transparent. So the angle light that comes in, particularly if you have some greying hair and some darker hair, as the angle light comes in, instead of bouncing or reflecting off the hair, the silver hair, it'll pass right through that silver hair at a certain angle, and it'll show up the scalp. So we get this time and time again, almost every week, someone coming in and saying, I can see my scalp, I can see my scalp. Now, I know that all my patients have X-ray vision anyway, because once you notice the scalp, you can't unnotice it.
Yes.
So that's something, but it's certainly true for both my men and my women, that the degree of the silvering of the hair directly impacts their ability to see the scalp. And so the advice then is often to use a little bit of colour. Now, the good news is the colour can work. The bad news is the hair grows at a centimetre a month, which makes it pretty hard to keep that colour, because the closest centimetre to the scalp is going to be transparent. Yeah. And that's still going to make the scalp visible. So we've got camouflage powders that you can put in that can do this. You can also, if you do home rinses, which are less damaging to the hair, you can put a rinse in. But that doesn't always pick up the hairs. We often see this when we examine our patients. They say, "Oh, I had my hair coloured yesterday, and still there are silver hairs that haven't picked up any of the colour." So it's not like it's a bit hit and miss when you do that. So maybe just using those shake-in powders is something to do. But if you are going to colour your hair, don't overdo it. I think the biggest mistake I see is people over-darkening their hair. Yeah. Because if you have pale scalp and black hair, for example, you've got a very big contrast between your hair colour and your skin colour. And that makes it quite clear to the eye that there's a difference there. Whereas if we go with the warmer colours, the gold,
reduces the contrast.
That's right. Using the golden colours, the more beigey colours, that will blur the eye a little bit more. And make it look a little bit thicker even when it isn't.
Is there much on the way that you are aware of in terms of medical therapy that can reverse greying? Because that's the question that we get asked
all the
Commonly,
time.
yeah.
So basically, the cells in the hair follicle that create the colour are called melanosomes, because they create melanin, which is the pigment, and basically they fade, and it's partly aging, partly genetic. So, for example, in some families the greying happens very early.
Yeah.
In others it happens very late. But the reality is that it's a natural part of aging to a degree, but there is a genetic influence for some people to do it. So the melanosomes seem to give up. Now, there are things that stimulate melanosomes, but the trick is, how do you get that to the melanosome to do it? And so this is where these new technologies of trying to use microsomes to put them inside the bubble, have it go into the scalp and maybe target to the melanosome. There's a lot of research being done on it because it's a huge marketplace. But let's just say it can't be easy because they haven't cracked it yet.
No, so there isn't any magical cure just yet to reverse greying of hair.
And it's obviously being looked at.
Yes, but I think the combination of the colour, the numbers of hairs, and the actual hair shaft diameter all will play a part in the visual appearance of thinning as you age, even if there's no element of, in this case, androgenic alopecia happening.
I see. It's a kind of a good news, bad news story. The good news is you don't have a disease process that's going to make you lose all your hair. So that's the good news. The bad news is you're still going to get, like a little bit less volume. And,
and that's a matter. That's just a fact of life. We're all, as we age, that's just a function of what's going to happen. So it's about using these various modalities to try and mitigate that, and certainly mask that, and minimize the effect.
Slow down. That's the anti-aging effect, if you like.
Yes. Perfect. All right. Well, that's really good. Hope you enjoyed that summary on aging and the effect on hair. Thanks again for watching. Really enjoy your feedback, and we'll see you again on the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.